Church. It is so great to see you all coming into this beautiful room. I love the smells coming from the back of the room. I love the smiles that I see at these tables. And I love the fact that it probably will take me a long time to get everyone's attention as we move into this service. So we're just going to go with it, act like it's an Agape Sunday. And if you are coming into this space for the first time ever, you have come on one of the best Sundays of the year because you've come to our shared meal, where at the end of this service we get to partake with the meal in the back together. And so we don't do that every day, I'm sorry to say, but you are welcome to come and you are welcome to check in with me at the end of the service or with Thomas and Helena in the back at the welcome table. If you are new here, we would love to get to know you. But if you don't know me, my name is Micah. My pronouns are he and they, and I am the senior minister here at Judson, along with all of the other ministers that you see at these tables right now. And we always begin our service first by turning to that camera and waving hello to the Judson Diaspora in the Zoom room. Hello, everybody. We feel you in this space, and you are not left out of this shared meal. So grab something to eat wherever you are, put it in front of you, eat during the service, and then continue to eat with us as we share our shared meal after the service. And then also, I invite us to focus on the first peoples of this land who have tended and continue to tend it. We gather today on land that is the ancestral home of the Muncie Lenape tribe, of the Lenni Lenape people. We acknowledge these people of the Stony Country and decry the unjust taking of their Lenapehoking. We acknowledge that we also need to not simply acknowledge, but we need to acknowledge well and move beyond ceremony to reciprocity. So in that vein, we commit to expanding ourselves in order to better understand our place on this land. We extend honor to those people who still live on and steward the land. We commit to making meaningful connections between the original people and their ancestral land in order to counteract the myth-spinning systems in which we exist today, including white supremacy, Christian supremacy, and settler colonialism. And we commit to counteracting all harm to original peoples that perpetuates a narrative of erasure. That land acknowledgement is important every Sunday, but especially as we enter this week, as we will discuss later in our service, that land acknowledgement is something we need to commit to embodying every day, and even as we near whatever we are going to do on Thursday of this coming week. It is my joy now to direct your attention to the amazing Denise Koncelik, who is filling in for Henco today. Give her a round of applause because she's about to knock your socks off by accompanying our hymns. And she's also going to invite us to move deeper into this service with an original piece. Thank you, Denise. Thank you so much, Denise. Today's service is centered on the stories that have been fed to us, the stories that we continue to allow to loop inside our own minds and hearts, the stories that it might serve us to let go of, the stories that it might serve us to reach out for. It also centers on mythologies, national mythologies, personal mythologies. So however you have entered this space today, know that whatever stories you are swimming in right now, we meet you there. Wherever you are on that journey, we are ready to meet you as you continue your story. And I invite you to, if you feel comfortable, just close your eyes for a moment as I call us to worship with a prayer for our mythologies. We begin with stories. We began with stories. Threads of gestures, then images, then language, looping in, tying together, telephoning. Around a fire inside a cave. When did wounds enter? Narrative dominates, the dominant narrative a scab, the convenient falsehoods pus, the complicating truth prohibited purification. I lie to myself 100 times a day. What becomes of a population that does it 100 times a second? What stories have killed your spirit? Did you hear them or did you tell them? What stories have birthed slaughtering systems? Have you turned away or have you turned around? Anyone can become an ass. It just takes ignorance plus habit plus time. And imagine what millennia of that can collectively yield. I remember a rumor that began as a joke, 7th grade, preteen, mid-puberty, post-knowing better, and how good it felt to give in to the gossip, and how much it hurt to admit to its invention. It felt like the end of the world. It feels like the end of the world. Still, there are other stories conflagrant with the cure. There are other caves. Endings aren't just destinations, but mouths. Meet me at the fire. Let's find ourselves again in the ashes. Amen. And now I invite you to rise in body and or spirit, and let's sing together, "Come, ye thankful people, come." You sound beautiful, and you get more chances to sing soon. I need, as Suzanne comes up to the lectern, I need to celebrate Suzanne and Jacqueline, who is about to read after Suzanne, because we have had a heck of a day. Our two liturgists, both of whom were supposed to be here a little bit early today, they have been pulled away. One had a train breakdown coming from New Jersey. The other had a personal thing. So we've got Suzanne and Jacqueline filling in. Give them a round of applause. And if you want to be a liturgist, I would love to talk with you. We clearly not only need liturgists, but we need some pinch hitters too. So come find me after the service. Suzanne, I'm sitting right beside you. Tell me the story of Psalm 78.
Okay, first of all, you have to tell us who Asaph is.
I'm going to tell you in the sermon.
Later? Okay. Oh, in the sermon. We'll save it for this. Well, I bet none of you knew that he spoke with an Appalachian accent. But this is his instructional poem, Psalm 78, verses 1 through 4 from the Inclusive Bible. My people, hear my teaching. Listen to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden from of old, the things we have heard and known, things our ancestors have told us. We won't hide them from our children. We will tell the next generation.
Thank you.
All right, the modern testimony is from the Native Hopi blog, November 6, 2023. It's important to know that for many Native Americans, Thanksgiving is a day of mourning and protest since it commemorates the arrival of the settlers in North America and the centuries of oppression and genocides that followed. Organized by the United American Indians of New England in 1970, the fourth Thursday in November, Thanksgiving, is recognized as the National Day of Mourning and for Native Americans and their allies. Many people gather at Coles Hill and Plymouth for an organized rally and day of mourning on Thanksgiving. Here's what they have to say about the choice to mourn. Thanksgiving Day is a reminder of the genocide of millions of Native people, the theft of Native lands, and the relentless assault of Native culture. Participants in National Day of Mourning honor Native ancestors and the struggles of Native people to survive today. It is a day of remembrance and spiritual connection, as well as protest of racism, oppression, which Native Americans continue to experience. Some Native Americans mourn publicly and openly, while some choose to refrain from participating in this national holiday. If you could stand as able and sing We Gather.
Please be seated. And would you pray with me? May I say what I need to say, and may you hear what you need to hear. Amen. So our shared meal awaits us, weighing down the tables in the back of the room, and likewise our shared stories, especially about this complicated holiday that awaits us this next week, continues to weigh us down. So as we prepare to feast on delicious food and fast from our sanitized mythologies, I have two questions for you. What stories do you use well? And what stories do you not use well? I will come back to these questions in just a moment, but from my own perspective, I have stories that free me, encourage me, liberate me, and make me feel more interconnected with others. And then I have stories that imprison me, terrify me, fill me with anxiety, and make me feel completely alienated from others. I have both new visions that come from openness and empathy and imagination, and I have old tapes that noisily fill my head, keeping me stuck in the same lies and patterns and habits that I should have abandoned long ago. If you pay attention to today's ancient testimony, you'll notice two things. If you have been following along in this room or at home, you can see that we are back in the Psalms. We have been studying the Psalms for the past few weeks, and if you're really paying attention, you'll notice that this psalm is different from any of the other psalms we've read up to now. Does anyone remember the first psalm that I hate when I give these tests because nobody remembers. Class? Anybody remember the first psalm that we studied in October, way back in October? That was the second one, but you have the right answer in like 4 seconds. Way back in October, we started with Psalm 96, which scholars call an enthronement psalm, a regal psalm. And then we wandered through what, Bill? Psalm 23. Nice. Psalm 23, which scholars call a psalm of trust. And then we got a little angsty with Psalm 42 and 43, which scholars call complaint psalms, some of my favorite psalms. And now we are here in the classroom of Psalm 78, which scholars call a teaching psalm or an instructional psalm. Psalm 78 boasts the honor of being the longest psalm in the Psalter, so you're welcome for not making Suzanne read through the entire thing. We've only got the first few lines printed in your bulletin today, and the first thing that you'll hopefully notice is that there is a superscription that Suzanne pointed out before the rest of the psalm kicks in, and there's an attribution to this fellow named Asaph. Anyone know who Asaph was? Okay, we're batting 1,000 here. Asaph, even though we usually skim over these attributions, Asaph is a really important person here because Asaph was believed to be a very, very important and talented temple musician during the time of King David's reign. So what that means is that we had a superstar constructing this psalm. So this is like a greatest hit. And it directly ties it and tells us when this psalm is believed to have been written, because Asaph is directly tied to King David. So the other thing that I hope that you'll notice is that though our translators have rendered the word as instructional, that probably is not the direct translation of the Hebrew. In fact, the original Hebrew word to describe this psalm is maskil, which stems from the root of the Hebrew word sakal, which means to have insight. So yes, This is an instructional psalm, a teaching psalm, but this is not just some dry instructional sermonic history lesson. This is a lesson meant to instill wisdom in all who hear it, especially our children, the next generation. The rest of Psalm 78 is a robust retelling of the Hebrew people's journey, their exodus from Egypt, their wandering in the wilderness, their journey to a new land, and their establishment of David as king. And it's a long and detailed history, and it is meant to keep the stories going. The tales of fear and faith, of wandering and wondering, of searching and settling, of building and becoming. And these stories are important. It is imperative for history to be rehearsed and rehashed because we tell ourselves stories in order to live. But the trouble comes when we humans muck it up, which we tend to royally do. We not only tell ourselves stories in order to live, but we also tell ourselves stories in order to convince ourselves why certain others should not live, or why certain others are less than or don't belong in the land where they are, or in order to sanitize and whitewash our own ignorance, our own anxieties, our own insistence that our side of the story is the whole story. You probably see where this is going. Our national holiday of Thanksgiving is simultaneously complicated and very, very simple. As many of us prepare to feast together today and this coming week, it is always important for those of us who were fed a consistent diet of pleasant pilgrim mythology to dismantle those lies as we dine and also make sure that we are consuming other sides of the story. It's necessary to recognize that, as Jacqueline read, for many Native Americans, Thanksgiving is a day of mourning and protest. Not just a day to sit out, a day of mourning and protest, commemorating the arrival of settlers in North America and the centuries of oppression and genocide that followed. When we started to study the Psalms last month, did anybody remember the question that I asked? I asked if there were ways that we could together create new interdependent songs to replace our old violent songs that we just keep on singing. And today, with Thanksgiving and Psalm 78 as our teaching tools, it's important to add a complicating layer to this question, because we cannot create new songs to replace our old songs without facing the music of our old wrongs. And it can be overwhelming to face that music. Our old dance moves don't work, and we look messy, and we get embarrassed, and we get flustered, and God forbid we look like we don't know what we're doing. And at Judson, I know we like to look like we know what we're doing. I know I do. But to use a term from our siblings in the Buddhist tradition, the only way to move through this learning of new moves is to adopt a sort of beginner's mind. Anybody here know what beginner's mind is? Okay, I see some nods. Beginner's mind is a willingness to go back to the start and look at everything with an openness that is only available to those who are willing to be taught. Beginner's mind is to go back to the start and approach things as if you are someone who is willing to be taught. And the trouble is, we have so many stories that we tell ourselves and that we tell one another that keep us spinning in the same dominant narratives that help us to dismiss others and demean ourselves and end up dehumanizing us all. So, what stories do you use well? And what stories do you not use well? I hope you are willing to follow me and expand from far past Thanksgiving here, because we all have stories to which we cling, right? Did you walk in here with a few stories that you're telling yourself about yourself? A few stories that you're telling yourself about other people? A few stories that you're telling yourself about somebody who's sitting across the table from you? Bubbling under the more horrifying collective atrocities of genocide and colonization and the collective lies of xenophobia and white supremacy and Christian supremacy are the more mundane rhythms of our individual stories. Just as the history presented in something like Psalm 78 can be appropriated and misused in order to justify all kinds of horrific things like war, so each of us holds stories within us that have become unhelpful, harmful feedback loops. These echoing loops keep us turned away from the liberating insight that might come if we looked those stories square in the face and asked ourselves if we were actually using these stories well. So here's what I actually mean when I ask what stories you're using well and what stories you're not using well, okay? For me, a story is being used well when it connects us, ourselves, to ourselves, and simultaneously connects us to everybody else, to other humans, to other species, to the earth, to the spirit in a way that draws us toward deeper love and compassion and continuing creation, okay? A story is not being used well when it fills us with disdain for other humans, degradation of other species, a disregard for the earth, and a dismissal of the spirit in a way that drowns us in deeper despair and disconnect and continuing destruction. And I'd also argue that the stories we each don't use well also end up truly dehumanizing ourselves in the process. But it's hard to see that in the moment because it feels really good to not use stories well. Any story can be used in either way. The same Christian scripture that has called one person into deeper faith and hope has also convinced someone else that other religions aren't valid at all. The same Thanksgiving story that has been watered down and fed faithfully to eager students for centuries dismisses the absolutely horrific traumas that Native Americans have experienced and continue to experience. We are creatures who use story and metaphor and superstition and imagery and poetry for good and for ill. For example, there is a brilliant, just published book that has completely rocked my world. Get your pen out if you're a reader. It's by a poet named Sonia Swift, and it's called Echo Loba, Loba Echo. It's a strange hybrid of essays and poetic fragments that explore how the image of the wolf has been celebrated, distorted, used well, and not used well since time began. And I don't know how much time you usually spend thinking about wolves. Who got up this morning thinking about wolves? Bill, I believe you. I actually believe you. I do not know how often you think about wolves, but I would say start thinking about them. I imagine that deep down you must have some partially formed opinion about wolves. Maybe your opinion of wolves was shaped by fairy tales, and you think of the conniving beast from the tale of Little Red Riding Hood. Maybe you think of them as being predators from whom other animals, especially those animals that we force into agriculture and farming, must be protected. Maybe you have no idea what you think about wolves, but Swift's book does the work that I'm talking about today. She goes back to the beginning with a beginner's mind to see why wolves went from being incredibly respected by certain peoples to being incredibly feared by other peoples and are now incredibly endangered. Swift argues that transformation is at the heart of many stories told about wolves, and that this fact might make them especially vulnerable to being demonized by dominant empire narratives. A being that is wise and clever and smart enough to continually transform in a trickster way, that creature is incredibly dangerous to dominant narratives that want us to stay stagnant and fearful and concretized in our old lack of transforming ways. Swift argues that wolves are the most persecuted animals in the world, especially due to the fact that they have been hunted like pests, especially by those who feel that they are an imminent threat to their livestock. And we can talk later if you would like. I will be the killjoy sitting there wishing that we didn't actually have anything that we actually call livestock. So come and find me. We can talk about it. I'm glad that the decorators put a live turkey up here as opposed to some turkey that looks like it's about to be eaten. But that's for another sermon too, but you can find me. Now I'm being punished. I'm going to put that there. Oh no! Wolves are now incredibly endangered because of the stories we have told ourselves about them, thank you. The mythologies we have allowed to build up around them and the lies that we have perpetuated about them. We have carelessly crafted story, metaphor, superstition, imagery, and poetry that justifies the endangerment of these gorgeous creatures. And I want us to really think about that for a moment. In a place where we do things like include liturgy, poetry, words, when I asked who woke up thinking about wolves, I saw no hands, except for Bill's. Okay, Suzanne too. Suzanne and Bill woke up thinking about wolves. But you still have those images coursing through your body. Even if you cannot name the stories that you use well and the stories that you don't use well, they are using you. Every metaphor that you have ever heard, every image that you have ever seen, every story that you've been told, it's in you. So whether you are deciding how to use them, they are using you. And if we will listen to the Ojibwe people, the most populous tribe in North America, we could learn that the Ojibwe word for wolf has always been Maingan. And Maingan translates to the one sent here by that all-loving Spirit to show us the way. You will never be able to say that you don't know that. Now it's in your body. Maingan is the Ojibwe word for wolf, meaning the one sent here by that all-loving Spirit to show us the way. Do you see how the story shifts here? For the Ojibwe, wolves are guides, and somewhere along the way, white colonizers decided they were dangerous to whatever narrative they needed to believe, so the dominating forces created a dominant narrative that has now resulted in these beloved creatures being hunted and slaughtered and derided, and I do not think that that is using the story well. Spoiler alert. What becomes of a people who use fear as their guiding force? What becomes of a people who use fear as their guiding force? What kind of guidance and wisdom and transformation do we keep from entering our hearts? As we prepare to observe Trans Day of Remembrance tomorrow, we must ask ourselves, what becomes of a people who fear the continuing transformation of people becoming who they deeply know they are? Are you afraid of becoming the person who you know you are? As we prepare to observe Thanksgiving in all of its complications, we must ask ourselves what becomes of a people who fear telling the truth and allowing that truth to inspire our liberating work. What stories do we want to tell our children? What songs do we want them to sing? And what mutilating music do we need to face and dismantle and then recompose? That will be beautiful music. And I'm going to stop here today. I'm getting so sweaty. I'm being like a Baptist up here. I hope that by now it is obvious that we need to tell our children and ourselves the truth of the violent colonialist foundations of our Thanksgiving story. I hope that by now we at Judson can trust that our children can handle that truth. They can probably handle that truth better than we can handle it. Heck, it's the children who are leading us right now in our movements against climate catastrophe and against the war machine and against the norms we thought we all had to simply perpetuate and box ourselves in with. Our children can not only handle the truth, they are telling us the truth. They basically have rewritten that very start to that psalm that Suzanne read. Our children can handle the truth even more readily than many of us can. And I also want you to think of all the stories within you as an individual. Which stories are you using well and which ones are you not using well? Is there a story that plays in your head and keeps you from becoming the you who you know you need to be? Do you harbor an old story that says that you need to be a certain way in order to belong? Do you cling to a story that hurts you much more than it helps you? Why do you continue to play and to harbor and to cling to those old feedback loops? What would happen if you faced that mucked up music and committed to a different song? How can you take the model of that transformation-packed wolf and actually become your own guide, showing yourself the way to new, life-giving stories? What old story did you bring in here today? What old story did you kind of plop down on that table in front of you? What old story did you bring today that you are desperately trying not to let go of? The wolves are waiting, and the children are waiting, and we are all waiting. What kind of ancestors do we want to become? What kind of gods do we want to worship? What kinds of stories do we want to pass down? The transformation of our collective stories relies on our willingness to transform each of our individual stories. So right now, segue alert, we're about to view a short recording from our own Matthew Nelson, who is co-chairing this year's Stewardship Pledge campaign. And Matthew is going to tell you his Judson story. And before you view this as just some clever framework fabricated in order to ask you for money, I want you to really listen to Matthew's story of belonging, to Matthew's celebration of why he stays at Judson. Matthew gives his time and his energy and his financial resources to Judson because he has found ways that Judson's story transforms his own story. So what is your story within Judson and beyond Judson? Think of that as you listen to Matthew.
Good morning, Judson. My name is Matthew Nelson, and I use he, him pronouns. I am here as this year's co-chair for our pledge campaign, along with the amazing Jason Singh. I'm here to tell you my Judson story of belonging. I'm coming to you from the village along the White Cliffs, as the original people of this land, the Dakota, called St. Paul. I look out my window at those white cliffs above the Mississippi River, and on top of them are the sacred burial grounds of the Dakota Nation. I am grateful to be so close and to experience such a sacred place. Judson and the people of Judson are my sacred place, my sacred people. It's where I belong. From the moment David Johnson welcomed me to Judson, moments after the superstorm Sandy, I knew I was home. I knew I belonged. And my Judson story began. I belong because the show tunes warm this gay man's heart. I belong because Judson people held me as I struggled to understand the murder of George Floyd, and then they challenged me to do something about it. I belong because the music, the dance, the art are my prophets and inspire me. I belong because justice is preached here. We're at an inspiring moment in the Judson story. We have called Micah as our senior minister. What a moment to say yes to him. Yes to Judson. Yes to our impact with each other, with this community, and our world. Say yes with me. Yes to belonging. Say yes to revisiting, retelling, and reshaping our Judson story. Say yes to a pledge that reflects how much you value this sacred place and these sacred people. Say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Matthew's right there in the camera there. And I also just want to say, Matthew and Jason, thank you for taking on this work. A stewardship campaign is a lot to take on your shoulders. It's a lot of storytelling and a lot of story hearing and a lot of work. So we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. There will be letters going out. This is the practical part, then I'll go back to the poetic part. Practical part. Matthew said, I forgot to say the thing about the letters going out for the stewardship campaign. So I am saying that. Letters will go out. If you have questions about that, come talk to me and I will talk with Jason and Matthew about it because I probably don't know the answer, but I've practiced like looking very concerned about it and saying I'll get the answer. More poetic side. Whatever those stories are, individual stories, collective stories, we have nothing to lose from facing the music. The dancing will be awkward. You will look silly. You will look messy. I look messy. I look silly. But to bring this point home, Megan Thomas is gonna sing Let's Face the Music and Dance. I mean, these things just, it's like the universe brings them all together. Megan, thank you, thank you, thank you. Denise, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you have something that you'd like to give today to Judson, there will be old-fashioned baskets going around the space, and there are ways to give online that are listed in your bulletin. Thanks for all you all give to Judson.
There may be trouble ahead, but while there's moonlight and music and love and romance, let's face the music and dance. Before the fiddlers have fled, before they ask us to pay the bill, and while we still have the chance, let's face the music and dance. Soon we'll be without the moon, humming a different tune, and then there'll be them teardrops to shed. But while there's moonlight and music and love and romance, let's face the music and dance, dance. Let's face the music and dance. Thank you.
My goodness. Thank you, thank you. I had no idea that was about to happen. Wow, if that doesn't inspire you to face the music, I don't know what will. Would you please rise in body and or spirit? This service is ending, but our service in the world continues. Face the music, change the song, use your stories well. Let's sing once more together before we enjoy some celebrations and concerns and some shared meal together. Amen. many folks just sang that song for the first time? Okay, we faced the music. We did it. The metaphor continues. All right, we are about to share our shared meal, but please be seated for a moment. Now is the time where we open up the lectern for folks to share celebrations and concerns and announcements, and also welcome in the folks who are still with us from the Diaspora, who are now about to be projected on the wall so that we can see them and perhaps hear their celebrations and concerns if they have them. All right, soon. But the folks in the room, do as Bill and Ted are doing there on their excellent adventure up to the lectern. Ted, come on up for a moment.
Good morning, I'm Ted Dawson, he, him. I wanted to bring your attention to the cards and invites on your table. I, along with Mary Meyer and Lisa Holton and Keedian, and with Micah's guiding hand for many years, have been working on Friends of Judson, and we're about to launch what we call Judson Commons on March 6th in this room. Why Judson Commons? Well, I think your words today, Micah, and Matthew's words today about stories is what it's all about. We've been saying to ourselves for years, if these walls could talk. Well, what we're trying to do in the years to come and what's going to happen in the near future is to make sure that those walls continue to talk and those stories keep happening for many generations down the road for Judsonites in all of New York City. So please join us on Wednesday, December 6th for a fun night. We'll have a good time. And on a personal note, I want to thank you all, and Mike in particular, for the kind words and condolences this week after my brother Peter passed away very suddenly a week ago.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Ambrosini, and it was 2 years ago today that my dad passed away. And a great joy I had growing up with my dad was watching Fred Astaire and Ginger Roger movies together. And I mean, it's perfect. And Megan, wherever you are, what a beautiful, gorgeous rendition. And I felt my dad with me, so thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name's Bill, and the wonderful thing about excellent